Welcome to part two of my interview with John Circo. If you haven't heard the first part, I would take a moment right now and just listen to the last episode. And once you've listened to that, come back and listen to the rest of it. Enjoy! Welcome to Curious Joel, a show about curiosity taking us deeper into the topics of people's passion and interesting conversation. I'm your host, Joel Circo. Our guest today is John Circo. Now, if you think that name is a little familiar, he is actually my oldest brother. John, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well.
Awesome. So, you kind of talked about a few different things. What does a day in the life of a teacher look like? Like, just cut us off a slice of teacher life.
Teacher life. Get up early.
Early means...
Well, for me, I get up between 5:15 and 5:45.
Okay.
So that I have time to prep myself, prep my lunch, which my wife sometimes, most of the time, helps me with. Sometimes she has other things and she needs a little more sleep. Get my food together, and then I head out the door. I have a 20-minute commute to work. I like to arrive in my classroom an hour before my students.
Okay.
That gives me time, if I didn't update my whiteboards, update the whiteboards with, I have something that I call Do It Now. It's a prompt question to get the brains of the kids into what are we talking about today. Whether it's first period or second period or the last period of the day, they've not been thinking about my class.
Right.
So this prompt helps them to go, okay, this is what we're talking about.
Gear up for this.
Yes.
For the
and
history or whatever.
I used to call it warm-ups, and then I call it preliminaries. I eventually changed it to Do It Now, because when do you do it? Now. And it's kind of fun. The kids pick up on it and they're like, do it now, man. Do it now. So, and then the agenda, I always write down on the whiteboard. This is if we're doing a lecture, if we're doing notes, if we're doing an activity, if we're doing a video, if we're doing a quiz. It's all written on the board. So the kids are like, that's what we're doing today.
Right.
If they read the board. And then I write the homework on the board so that they know what to read. If there's a quiz coming up, a test coming up, a project that's due, that's all on the whiteboard.
Right.
Then I set up my computer, connect it to the projector, get my PowerPoints all set up, Google Classroom set up with all the things for the day. And if there's any last minute printing things that I need to do that. So by 7:30, I should be ready for students to start coming in. Class starts at 7:40.
Okay.
So I like to be ready to go before the kids are even thinking about coming to my classroom.
So kids think of you as existing in about 7:40, and you've already been at school in your classroom for an hour making sure everything is set.
That's what I try to do, yes.
Typically,
yep.
Normally, regularly, however you want to put it, yeah.
So kids come in, and kids these days, they're on their cell phone every moment that anyone's not telling them they can't be on their cell phone. So they walk in my classroom updating Snapchat, Instagram, playing Clash of Clans, listening to music, because if music's not happening, they don't live, or whatever.
I get that last one, to be honest.
As they come into my classroom, I remind them to put their phones up, to take the earbuds out, because with wireless earbuds, it's so much easier when they've got long hair facing away from the teacher to listen to my own music and not pay attention to the teacher.
Yeah.
I remind them to do it now, and then I go through the daily announcements for the school, reminders for my class. I always make sure I'm like, okay, guys, this is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing the next day of class. This is something that's coming up, so it's on the horizon. If they pay attention to me, they're never going to be like, well, I didn't know that we had the quiz today. I've been saying we've had a quiz today for the last week. It's been on RenWeb, which is digital communication of all our lesson plans. It's been on my whiteboard. I've said it at the beginning and end of class. So if you don't know this,
that's kind of on you.
It's all on you. So then we pray. I have the great fortune of teaching at a Christian school. So as a Christian teacher, my faith can be part of my lesson instead of something that is supposed to be damped down because you don't want to integrate religion into history. How do you teach history without teaching about religion? But anyway, so then I'll go into a discussion of the do it now question.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're doing notes, we jump into the notes. Sometimes I have outline notes for the kids to fill in. Sometimes it's just take notes off the PowerPoint, go through our notes. Usually there's some kind of activity that goes along with it. So after we've learned something, especially right now I'm teaching economics, we learn the thing. Okay, now let's put it into practice. Apply it. Most of the kids right now are really happy because they're like, I get it, because it's real world. This is how you do the thing. Right. This is how you see it happen.
Yeah.
And then after the activity, we move on to whatever else. And if there's homework, I try to give the kids opportunity to get homework done during class if possible.
That's cool.
It's all on Google Classroom, so whenever they finish an assignment, take a picture, upload on Google Classroom. But the sad thing is, as soon as they grab their phones, their brains fall out. Yeah. Some of them will upload, most of them do. But then there's the kids who pick up their phone and they're back on Snapchat and they don't turn the homework in. It's like, so there's, I would say about 30% of what I do is classroom management. Trying to keep the kids focused and on task, taking care of disciplinary issues. 50% is instruction of here's what you should know, here's how to use it, here's what you need to do with it. And the other 20% is interpersonal relations. Just trying to check up on the kids and make sure they're doing okay. I am very empathetic. I can read a person's body language of you're not doing well. I had one student a number of years ago who walked into class with a smile and how are you? I'm fine. After 2 weeks, I stopped the student at the door and I said, you don't have to lie to me. What? I said, you walk into my classroom with a smile on your face and you say you're fine, but I know you're not.
Yeah.
And you don't have to lie to me. And it's okay. If you don't want to tell me, that's fine. But just know you don't have to tell me that you're fine when you're not.
Yeah.
Student broke it down into tears, told me what was going on. We prayed it, and from that point on, we had a code of how they could communicate to me without telling the rest of the friends, I'm devastated today, whatever.
Yeah.
They had a way to communicate with me so that I could give them that little bit of emotional help that they needed to be able to come in and function. Because you walk into a classroom, I had a student a couple weeks back, boyfriend broke up.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the beginning of class, text came through, breaking up with you.
Wow, that's terrible.
I'm like, okay, step outside. Yeah. Take a minute. This is a good sign that this is someone you should not be with if they are going to text you at the beginning of the school day. Text you and say, I'm breaking up with you.
Right. That's a whole lot of bad stacked on top of each other.
So, I end up sprinkling a lot of interpersonal stuff in there.
Yeah.
If we finish a lesson and there's time left at the end of class, I don't like it being wasted time, because if I let the kids do whatever they want, they're just going to suck their brains on their cell phones. So I do what I call Circo stories. I'm like, I have a lot of stories. I've got a lot of life experience. So
you're the oldest. So
you give me a word and I'll tell you a story about it. And I told the kids at the beginning of the year, 98% of the words that come up in my classroom, I've got a story for. Of those, 5% didn't happen to me, but most of them did. Most of them are real stories that happened to me.
Yeah.
There might be like 2% of the stories that I tell that are somebody that I heard about.
Sure.
But so the kids are always trying to stump me with a word, and they don't think really broadly. So
what's the hardest word they've given you?
oh, they stumped me a couple months ago.
What?
They came up with a word and I said, I have no story for that.
Do you remember what the word is?
I want to say it was an animal.
Animal?
It was some kind of animal, and I was like, I have no word, no story. Sorry. And they're like, you always have a story. Like, I don't have.
This is your proof that these are true. These are real. Yeah. I'm not making these up on the spot.
Yep. But, you know, they'll say weird things, and I'm like, okay. And I'll give them options. And they're like, you've got options? I'm like, you guys are in high school. Gosh. I graduated high school. I graduated college. I've been married. I've had a kid. I've been working lots of different jobs. I've interacted with lots of people. So yes, I've got stories for a lot of different things.
Our siblings could do a whole podcast just on just the random stuff that has happened to us and the crazy things that have happened to us.
Yep.
Because we have a lot of experience with a lot of things.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of us have very different fields that we're in.
Yeah.
So,
but also very similar personalities in as such of things find us. We end up in the middle of a lot of things somehow magically.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could do a whole podcast just talking about just all the crazy things that have happened.
Yeah. So by telling these stories, I get the kids to know a little bit more about me personally. I entertain most of them, and that fills up the time before I let them go to their next classes, because it's high school. They don't get to just leave because I'm done.
Right. You're not one of those teachers like, the bell doesn't dismiss you, I dismiss you.
Oh, no, no, because the bell is there to remind me that it's time. So yes, I will be a little bit like that, but I teach to the bell, and I'm pretty good at making sure I'm done before the bell, right, unless the students aren't following instructions, sure, in which case I'm like, no, you can't leave yet because I have not finished giving you the instruction about the paper that I handed you. Right. And you won't read the paper.
Right. Yep.
So
I've learned that people don't like to read anymore. And sometimes when they do read, they don't care. And I found that out this winter, and it hurt me deeply because I was on our ropes course, which backs up to like our county park. And somebody just walked over from the county park. And I was just like, hey, excuse me, are you part of a group? And you're like, yeah, we're with the county park. I was like, well, this isn't the county park. This is actually a private camp. They're like, oh, is that what it meant by private property?
Oh my goodness.
And I had to like do my very best like acting skills of, I am not losing it. I did not just get stabbed in my brain with glass shards. Yeah. And our, the whole insurance thing of like, we can't have people that are not registered guests and all that, and ask them to leave politely. And then as soon as I'm like, what do you mean? That explains the private property signs.
Yep.
It's like you read it and you walked past it and you waited for someone to tell you before you like clicked, oh, I thought that was just for funsies. So yes, people have stopped reading things,
yeah,
and paying attention, and yeah. So yeah, I mean, telling your kids, hey, no, you have to listen because this is the only way I know you actually get this information, and it doesn't go throw in your backpack and then never come out again.
Yep. So that's one period, and then there's a small transition period before the next period comes in. If I'm teaching the same lesson, then I just reset everything. If I'm teaching a different class, because I teach an AP government class, and then I have my regular students who are in government and then econ. So if I'm switching, I switch all my PowerPoint, I switch all the notes, I switch the handouts, and that's when that all happens, that the next group of students can come in and I can get started teaching them. Similar pattern.
Right.
Then you hit lunchtime and go do lunch duty, and that's just supervising students at lunch and
make sure no food fights happen.
Yeah, or kids doing, oh my goodness,
dumb challenges from the internet.
Yeah, and well, he's my friend. Well, you can't throw your friend's backpack in the trash can. Well, it's just a joke. You just covered it in ketchup.
I'm a little annoyed that that's still a thing, because I remember YouTube, it like the whole like it's a prank thing was happening, like people would commit crimes and be like, it's a prank, bro. It's like you kidnapped somebody. That's no longer a prank. It's not funny. You didn't have permission. This is, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad that it's still like, it was just a joke. It's like, well, no, this is damage.
Yep.
Damage is no longer a joke.
This is now vandalism, and that's a
Right.
crime.
Yeah.
And
That's annoying.
so anyway, so lunch, and then after lunch, go back, teach another class. A typical day, if they balance classes out well, means that I have one free period out of 4 90-minute periods of the day. And in that time, I get to do lesson planning and grading and eat my lunch, because I don't eat lunch when I'm on lunch duty because I'm wandering around checking on students.
Right.
And then the school day comes to an end, and there's more prepping. Our school day ends at 2:40.
Okay.
Usually between 2:40 and 3:15. I try to stay in my classroom so that if students have questions, they can come find me easily.
Right.
3:15, I'll run to the office to try to prep copies for the next day if I have anything. Then back in my classroom, update whiteboards. If things happen overnight where I'm like, oh, this would be a really good idea, then I have to switch things in the morning.
Right.
But whenever I can, I try to write everything,
do as much as
prep
possible
everything
when you
before I
can.
leave.
Yeah.
So leave school around 4:00, 20-minute commute home.
So you're at school roughly, typically about an hour before, and then about how long after? My brain.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay, my brain lost track because you didn't use just solid whole numbers.
Right.
And that's about all my brain can do right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So an hour and a half. So that's 2.5 hours roughly that you're there without any students really.
Yep.
Before and after that, just kids just probably assume you just disappear.
Yep.
Okay, continue.
So get home. In order for me to do what I do, as a morning person, but honoring my wife and my son with being alive and present to do things, I take a nap when I get home in the afternoon, usually about an hour and a half before dinner. I eat dinner, hang out with my wife and son, get our son in bed, hang out with my wife, get my wife in bed, and 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I start working on more grades or more lesson planning or more prepping, and try to get in bed before midnight.
So like about an hour?
Hour and a half in the evening, depending.
Yeah. Okay. So that's...
Sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 4 hours.
Hold on. 2.5... 5 hours?
Yep.
About 5 hours that doesn't have any direct contact with students.
Yep.
That's a lot of outside of work that is being done.
Yes.
Okay. Because I've known for a long time. I mean, I get to hear about your late nights, and
and every birthday celebration that I'm like, I gotta go home, I gotta do lesson plans or
grading. Yeah, grading is, from my perspective, grading is usually the one that's usually what you're doing. Every once in a while, the lesson planning is usually secondary, is like every once in a while that. But like, I just wanted people to understand, like, there's a lot of extra work. It's not just like, well, kids show up at class at 8. I'm there at 7:50. And then kids get out at 3. I'm gone at 3:15. Like,
well, some teachers seem to make it happen, and I have asked a few teachers. When I started teaching, I had a teacher who was mentoring me, and she said, the third year of teaching, it finally settles down. What she failed to mention is that it's the third year of teaching the exact same class with the exact same textbook with the exact same curriculum that things start to settle down and you get a routine. And I have changed textbooks, changed what classes I'm teaching. Almost every year of my career, there's been some change where it's not just take what I did last year and do it again, only better.
Right.
This year is actually the third year. No, because economics was a brand new one last year again. So my econ class this year is the second year I've taught econ this time around. I've taught it once before 13 years ago, but that was a different textbook, different curriculum.
Right, and definitely different kids.
Yeah.
I would hope at least.
So my government textbook is new from 4 years ago. My AP Gov class this is the fifth year I've taught it, but they've changed what AP College Board standards are, so I've updated it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So it's a constant.
You haven't hit that third year settle yet.
No, theoretically, my AP Gov class I've been teaching for 5 years. I should have a routine, but they keep changing things, so I have to keep changing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so this mythical settling.
Some teachers achieve it. Some teachers only teach the one subject. And this is the 17th year they've taught this subject with the same book.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing. And maybe at that point, they just, at the end of the school day, go, everything's graded, and walk away.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted people to understand, like, there's a lot, like, for the, at least teachers that really care or that have been doing it long enough that have just the routine set in. But from what I've heard, and I've got quite a few teacher friends too, that like it's a lot of extracurricular activity as far as getting everything settled for these like 3 classes you teach a day.
Yep.
Or whatever it is. Like it's a lot of prep and a lot of after. There's a word for this somewhere. My brain lost it as I was trying to get it out of my mouth. But like the before and after, like prepping and resetting and all of that, like there's a lot of work that goes into it outside of the quote unquote normal work hours.
Yeah,
so,
I would call it parenthetical work.
Very fancy word. Do you want to explain to other people what that means exactly?
Well, parentheses go around a statement that is aside to your normal statement. So parenthetical just means it's extra next to belonging with. So I do parenthetical work before and after school. It helps me with the teaching day, but it's not part of the teaching day.
Right. Yeah. So I would not have been able to explain it as concisely as that. So like you used it, you can explain it.
No worries.
I use words and sometimes I'm like, great, I have to explain this one. All right. So what is a skill that you didn't realize you needed for teaching when you started teaching?
Organization. Now, hear me out. By nature, I'm a messy person. You look around my apartment and you'll find that I've got a pile of books over there and a pile of things over here. And it doesn't bother me. It's piles. Yeah. I know which pile I'm looking in or whatever. I learned very quickly as a teacher that when you have piles, students say, but I turned in my homework. And you're like, oh, I know, I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
Which pile did I put it in?
Yeah.
So I developed a very organized teacher personality.
Interesting.
If you come into my classroom, everything has a place. Everything is in order. There's no piles.
Right.
The students know exactly where to put things. I have homework bins, even though I don't collect a lot of physical homework anymore, but they are clearly labeled and clearly marked for those things like term papers and tests that I still do physical. They have to turn it in. There's an orderly place for everything.
Right.
I had a student once during class say, Mr. Circo, you must have lost my homework. And 2 other students spoke up and said, he wouldn't lose your homework. But if you look in my drawers of my desk at school, that's where the mess hides.
Yeah.
Because that's my stuff the kids aren't going to see.
Yeah.
It's just piles in there. But I know what's in my piles. Yeah. But I had to develop this organization so that the students could trust me of this is the next thing.
Yeah.
I know exactly where. I don't spend 5 minutes during class while the students are going picking up papers. Oh, is it under this pile? I know it's around here somewhere.
Right.
I know exactly where things are. And they know exactly what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I had to develop that in the classroom. Because otherwise, I'm very messy, star personality. Let's just have fun and do things. And I learned my first week of teaching that when you say, oh, let's do this, then you have to come up with a way to fairly grade the thing you just did. You have to come up with rubrics. Step by step, these are the elements I'm looking for and the qualities that you must meet in order to make an A project, a B project, a C project, a D project, an F project.
It's kind of like random.
Otherwise,
I don't know. I kind of like that one better.
I like yours better, which is not
arbitrary and, you know.
So developing that organized personality was something that assisted me a lot, to the point where a lot of teachers will ask me about stuff because they're like, well, you always know what's going on. You always know where the thing is. You know how to do this. I'm like,
I'm pretending. I'm figuring it out too. I just look better doing it.
Well, I've developed it to the point that I'm not pretending in my classroom anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no, don't look at me. I did. Nope. Yeah. Yep. I hate when I accidentally say something that sounds smart to somebody. I'm like, oh, so you know. I was like, no. I knew the one thing. That was, you've heard my entire novel.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are the top 3? And this is kind of an arbitrary number. If there's a more, let me know if 3 is just not possible. Like the top 3 skills you need to be a teacher. And I'm guessing that organization is going to be one of those at least.
Organization is definitely a skill that will be beneficial to you as a teacher, just in your curriculum outlines, figuring out what you need to do. I would say, and some teachers aren't as good at this, but communication.
Okay.
Theoretically, we're all really good communicators. That's what we do for a living, is communicate information and ideas and give directions and clear instructions. And if you cannot do that, you're going to be a frustrated and frustrating teacher, because people will not understand what you're trying to get them to do. And as much as some students would really like to please you as the teacher, some students are looking for any excuse not to do any work. Oh, well, Mr. Circo never explained it.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I have step-by-step instructions for you. Clear communication is a necessary skill.
Yeah.
The third thing I would say, I don't know if this counts as a skill, but it is necessary.
Okay.
Patience.
I think it's a skill. It can be developed.
Yeah.
There's classes.
Yes.
There's ways to handle it. Like, yeah, it's a skill.
But if you do not have patience, the learning process isn't instantaneous.
It takes patience.
Kids will say things because they're kids that they might mean, they might not mean, but if you don't have patience to deal with it, it can get out of hand really quick.
Yeah.
So, yeah, organization, communication, and patience, I think, are the top 3 things you need if you want to be a successful and happy teacher.
I like it. So these are going to my more stereotypical questions. What was easier than you expected, like going into it? Or if you want, you can start with the opposite of that. What was something harder than you expected?
I think harder than I expected is a little bit easier to answer. But harder than I expected, coming up with clear lesson plans. Like, it's really easy to say, I'm going to teach world history.
Right.
What? What history? What specific things do you need to communicate?
Mm-hmm.
How do you pick once you get into it, which things are important. One of
Picking what part of history is important enough to actually like.
I mean, even been given a textbook. I had my third department head. Excuse me. She was my first department head, and then she was my third department head, and whatever. But she had to teach me this lesson. You don't have to teach every page of the book.
Right.
When you are lesson planning, especially as someone who's passionate about the subject and has learned so much more than what this textbook has to offer, I could go off and expand a paragraph into a whole day's lesson.
Right.
That's not what these kids need, though.
No.
They need to understand the broad strokes of history.
Mm-hmm.
Lesson planning, my first year, I kept trying to do like minuscule slivers, and my mentor teacher was like, but is this necessary? How much of this information about medieval Europe do the kids really need? It's like, well, it's fun.
It's fun, but is it necessary?
Yeah. So it was a lot harder, and it still is one of the most challenging things for me, developing the lesson plans in such a way that I say, here's a clear learning objective that the kids are going to come away with. And off of that, the scaffolding of how am I going to instruct? How am I going to direct? How am I going to get the kids to apply so that this isn't just a name the 47 presidents in order?
Right.
Okay, what are they learning from that? So,
yeah. Okay.
Was easier than I expected. I think I had a couple of advantages going in as a classroom teacher. Number one, I love talking to people. Mm-hmm. Number two, I love kids. Number three, I love history. And so I'm going into a room of people, talking to them about a room of kids, talking to them about history. So that was really easy for me. But for a lot of teachers, just getting up in front of people is a challenge.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it was easier than what people told me because of my personality.
So I used to have this as a longer question, and I found it mostly redundant. But it was, what did you expect to be hard? And when you got there, it was easier. Like the expectation. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for you is like what was expected, like, because like there's things like people have told me like, oh yeah, it's really like, I think my first year at camp I was learning how to do like the ropes course and like belaying and tying knots and stuff like that, and like everyone was like, oh yeah, it's really difficult, like the knots are complicated, and like, you know, if you mess up, it's life on the line, and like the setup was it's really gonna be hard to like work through this and like do all this stuff, and like I was tying knots behind my back within like 10 minutes because my instructor was like, well, you got the knot down, can you tie it without looking at it, can you tie it like behind your back, can you like, I was like, yep, I can do all these things, I can almost tie it with one hand. The knots can't really do with one hand, but I got about as close as you could, and it was like, okay, that was a lot easier than everyone else told me, and so my expectation was and I was like, oh, well, that was a breeze.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any part of teaching that was actually easier than what people told me.
Okay.
Teaching is a difficult profession.
Yes.
I was going to say getting that relationship with the kids, but there's still, I mean, it's March and there's kids in my classes who still, I don't know who they are, how to help them best. I would say entertaining the kids, but back in the day it was a lot easier before everyone had digital devices on them,
multimedia devices that can play
whatever they want in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, it
was a lot easier to entertain with stories. These kids are a lot more tuned out because as soon as you start telling a story they don't want to hear, it's not entertaining to me. It's not not the kind of thing I want to hear.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think there's really any part of teaching.
That's a perfectly fine answer.
Yep.
If nothing fits that category, that's fine.
Yep.
Moving on to, what's your favorite and least favorite part of your job?
think my favorite part is still the reason why I got into it. That moment of teaching when a kid goes, "Mr. Circo, I get it.
Right.
This is what it is, and this is how it does, and
The
this
eureka
is
moment.
yeah, that eureka moment of a kid that just has totally bought they know it. This is now something that they will never forget
That's
because
a permanent.
they've made the connections, and they're like, "This is awesome."
Yeah.
And there's lots of little versions of that in teaching,
Sure.
whether it's a personality thing or whether it's an instructional moment or whether it's the random question that some kid brings in from the outside that's not part of the lesson, but you still get to explain it and they're like, "Oh, that's awesome."
Yeah.
Um,
Like the King Tut moment today.
yes. The worst.
I have some prompts if that's helpful because I thought of a couple of areas that for different people could be the potentially worst part.
Well, let me give you 3.
Okay.
Number 1, you have to discipline the child at the point of recommendation for expulsion.
Okay.
I had to do that with a student last year.
Okay.
And the kids don't understand this. We are on their side. We want them to succeed. Yeah. We are doing everything possible to help them succeed. And
yeah, you're not doing this to try and get
out.
Yeah.
They're like, "You're so mean." If you don't learn this lesson here right now in high school, you might end up in jail because you're not listening, following to authority, whatever, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Number 2, students dying.
Wow. Okay.
Whether that's a student who's current or a student who's recently graduated, I have been to 8 memorials for former students. And most of the time, the information that I get about that student's death, they were making the unwise choices that I had been trying to convince them otherwise when they were my student. We actually had a student who was expelled from our school last year, partially because of behavior in my classroom. This student died in a car accident last week. Unwise choices. And you look at that and you look at the kids who are left, who are their friends, and you're like, life isn't permanent.
Yeah.
Third, when you have a student whose personal life is interfering with their education, and that can take all kinds of different directions, whether it's the parents getting a divorce and it's messy and the parents are fighting, the kid doesn't have their book because it's at mom's house and tomorrow's dad's house and whatever, or whether it's the student who gets their boyfriend, girlfriend breaking up with them right before they walk into your classroom, or the kid who just found out they did not get into the college they wanted to, and they put all their eggs in that basket, and now they have no idea what they're going to do with life, or the kid who's suicidal. I mean, as a teacher, I've experienced a lot of different downs with my kids, and sometimes I am able to be that person who is the shining light of God in their life, and can be like, look, whatever those circumstances are outside this classroom, this is my classroom, and I control this. And I can't do anything about out there, but I can do stuff about in here to make this a safe space for you to be able to be real.
Right.
I had a student who graduated 3 years ago, and she signed my yearbook and said, "Thank you, Mr. Circo, for making your room a place where I could be me."
Yeah. That's impactful. You know, just having that. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like working the ropes course so much, is because I get to be some of the, like, people face their fears in my presence, basically.
Yeah.
Just like right then, right there, like they're confronting things that, they've dealt with their whole life. And, you get to be that safe space that, like, hey, I know, I'm sorry, your dad had this thing and, did this, or like whatever happened in your life. But here, right now, the worst thing you can happen is you get a little scared. You fall a little bit. You're going to be safe, though. Like, this is a spot that not a lot can go wrong. And at the worst of it going wrong, it's still safe. You're still in a controlled environment. And, like, providing that for somebody provides a lot of, like, emotional breakthrough points for them, which is really an amazing spot to be in. And, and I can understand and relate to that, like, just being able to be a safe spot for people.
Yeah.
I was not expecting, I didn't thoroughly think that through of like how bad it can be, because I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people and you're getting to know a lot of people every year, and you're a very large chunk of their life too. Like, school is a very big
I spend more time with my students than most of their parents do.
That's sad and crazy. But yeah, I mean, my seems really stupid. Is like, because my thought was like, it's either going to be the students, the parents, or like other staff. That's like the hardest thing. And I'm like, right, they like,
if outside circumstances did not impact the school, then yeah, I would say talking to parents being my son. How many times have I said this? Well, my daughter would never do that. I'm sorry, but they did do that, which is why I recorded that in the disciplinary journal and said they did this in my classroom. Well, they'd never do that. Yet they did. Right. My son always gets A's. Well, they're not getting A's. Well, that's your fault. No, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Other students got A's, so it's something your kid chose to do.
Right.
No.
I was excited because these prompts were based off of like some mostly of like your stories of dealing with like parents that are like at the very last minute trying to like fix a whole year's worth of like bad grades and stuff. Like, well, what if we turned in all the assignments for the whole year, on graduation day? Can you boost them up to an A+, please?
Yep.
And it's like, nope. Like, that's what I was expecting. And like, I appreciate your honesty, and it's something that like I never really considered on, like, you have to deal with their life, and like it's not something to like, for me at the ropes course at the camp, and like it's like, okay, I might get to know somebody, maybe I might see them like 4 times that week and then they go, but I'm not like Facebook friends with any of them. I'm not like invited to any of their weddings. Yeah, but like that's a lot, like, and I really appreciate you sharing that. It's not very often that I'm sitting and look at a prompt and go like, well, I'm just gonna crumple that piece of the paper and throw that away.
Yeah, no, there are lots of little downs that are easy to overcome. Yeah. There's cheating students, there's students with disciplinary issues, there's those faculty meetings that you get called to and you sit through and you go, this could have been an email.
Oh yeah. It could have been in emails.
Yeah. Most our and I have to say our principals are great. Most of the time we have meetings, it's very purposeful and it is relevant. Better for us to be all together than an email.
Quick memo.
Yeah. Most of the faculty that I work with, I love them. They're great people. Very few interpersonal difficulties.
The staff was more just general things that I hear about other teachers and stuff like that, where it's like the other staff are not very great. I haven't heard, I think, any stories from you about others, like other teachers or stuff like that being not great. But yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get back up to some.
You want me to give you a couple more pluses?
Sure. Let's do that. I don't want people like crying listening to this episode. I talk about serious stuff, but
Yeah. So last year, I got invited to go to the 10-year reunion for the class of 2012. The students had graduated, and they said, we want these teachers to come and share with us and talk, find out how you're doing 10 years later. And I talked to some of the students, and we visited one of them on our trip this summer. We saw her lab. She does bioengineering somewhere in
Whoa.
Texas, and she's building this contraption. And I'm like, that's so awesome. And I got to teach her and help
Some of
her
yeah, like
go in that
you had
direction.
a couple blocks in that tower.
One of the students that we saw at the 10-year reunion invited me to come see his show. He had written, produced, and starred in.
What?
One of the characters is named after me.
No way. You,
Us.
by the way, that's now the second person on my podcast that has a play that is directly relevant to them.
Yeah. Now Marion's like, you can't remember it. What's the name of his show? Scott Robbins and the Traveling Show. Tyler Tafoya.
Okay.
And one of the characters, he started writing this apparently in high school. So when I was his teacher,
right,
and one of the characters is the ringmaster for this traveling circus, and his name is Circo because of me.
Uh-huh.
So I went to go. I bought the tickets to go see the show. I checking in, and the lady at the ticket booth was like, "What's your last name?" I said, "Circo." She's like, "One of the characters in our show has that name." I'm like, "Well, the guy who wrote it was my student." She's like, "Oh, he's my husband."
Oh,
I'm like, "Oh, cool." So I got there's things like that where you're like,
really odd. The other play, so I the author Joanne Bischoff, she has a book about a circus that got turned into a play by somebody, and so the fact that both plays that have been mentioned on this show have been about circuses is kind of funny,
especially given the title that our family gatherings at your campground are given, right?
The Circo Circus extravaganzas or summer like they like to name them after like TV specials, but it's Circo Circus. Yes.
So those kinds of moments, connecting with former students who are married and have kids of their own, and those are moments that give me great joy and affirmation that I'm doing something really good.
Yeah, I mean, just like having those moments where you can actually see the impact, and like, I mean, that's something that at our camp we try and refocus on. Like, this isn't just about this like weekend or the week that they're up there. This is supposed to be impactful for their life, and like that's why a lot of the people, like the permanent staff, the full time, our executive director, our assistant director, like their lives have been changed by camp, not just like a week of fun, like their entire lives, the course of their life has been changed by camp, and that's why they're there. Is like we have to remember, like we're not just like trying to get them through this week. We're trying to make sure that this is a lasting impact. And like when we have those like moments where John Offhammer, who actually was on the show as well, like he actually goes out and finds these stories, and when he gets to report, like gets to talk to us about it in our staff meetings, is one of the most encouraging moments. Where like, by the way, you know, these decisions were made at camp. You know, this happened. This person, like, they were able to whatever, and like the goals that were met, the decisions, the life changing moments that have happened at camp are like one of the things that we have to remember. Like, oh yeah, this is why we're here, and those are very encouraging to like. I played a part in that.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of me that helped that happen, and you know it's really cool.
Yep,
it's really cool. What is something you wish more people knew about either teaching or teachers? Just like if you could have like a public service announcement to the whole world about whatever.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that we as teachers wish more people knew is how much we really do care. Like, if parents and students had the attitude of, my teacher is my biggest advocate in this
They're
classroom.
on my side.
They're
fighting
on my
for
side.
me.
They're trying to help me.
Yeah.
If they had that attitude coming in when they had problems, that would shift so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's just one of those, my students don't realize how much I care about them until something traumatic happens or something major happens, and I'm still me doing me.
Right.
But we set time aside and say, well, we need to deal with this.
Right.
And every time I have a disciplinary issue with a kid, I'm like, look, you may not understand this right now, but everything I'm doing right now is for your benefit.
Yeah.
This isn't about me having to be in control of my classroom.
Right.
It's about you needing to be in control of you.
Right.
And in my classroom, disruptive behavior interrupts a lesson.
Yeah.
But outside my classroom, not being in control of your own decisions and what is happening leads to more severe consequences.
Right.
No.
Yeah. That kind of like generally, like, there's more Mr. Feeney's out there than like the stereotypical TV subs. It's not like the people like, oh, fine, I can finally go home. It's like, hey, we're putting in, hours of extra work to try and make sure that this is that you're getting the best. And we're also putting a lot of emotion and like care into everything. And I'm sure that's also something that's kind of difficult, is when people just sit there and not realize, like, hey, I don't get anything if you fail. I get, there's nothing, I don't benefit from you getting kicked out or, giving you a, detention or anything like that. I don't benefit from any of that, Yeah. Okay. So let's just say someone's listening to this episode and they're like, you know what? Teaching. That's what I want to do. Right now, that's when they just figured it out. What advice would you have for someone that's just starting to get into teaching?
I think that understanding what teaching is all about is the first level of understanding how much you're going to pour into it, how much education you need to be able to be successful. Understanding that it's a relatively thankless job, though there are moments that make it worth it.
But it's not something you get a thank you every single day.
Yeah. I tell my students all the time, I said, when I was younger, I thought teaching would be cool because you always got summers off. I didn't understand how much work it was. I just thought, you get holidays and summer vacation, and it's so wonderful to be a teacher. But I said, one of the things you really need to understand is that you go into the classroom and you feel under attack from the students, and even students that want to learn. You feel under attack from your department heads who are always trying to help you grow. Yeah. But sometimes the criticism, you just weren't quite there, and you feel that, I need to. I have a great department head. I've got great principals. I just got a formal evaluation last week, and my principal had lots of wonderful things to say, including that she appreciates that I try to grow and take counsel and change things. And so the things that she marked on my thing, that it is, you would do well to do this and change that. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. But it would be really easy for me as a person to go, she hates me, she's just trying to get rid of me.
Yeah. It's a lot of scrutiny and criticism.
You have to have pretty tough skin as a teacher. Yeah. And you can't let that tough skin get in the way of your empathy for your students, which is such a very weird. I've got my shields up. It's down. It's up. It's down. It's up. It's down. It's down.
Certain things can pass through this, but not everything. But I also have to be careful because sometimes it looks like one, but it's not. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so just like,
and the impact on your family.
Yeah.
My wife is very understanding to allow me to do the things that I do and not be like, well, you never take time for me. And I try to make sure I spend quality time with her.
Yeah.
And there's weeks that it doesn't happen, and we're just like sitting next to each other on the couch. I'm trying to get work done, and she's trying to exist, and
That's hard sometimes.
sometimes it is.
I've had some weeks.
So
I'm just like,
if you're thinking about being a teacher, make sure you understand the whole aspect of the curriculum development and the interpersonal dynamics and the patience that it takes. And it's a lot of work, but if it is the work that you are supposed to be doing, it is very rewarding.
Yeah. Okay. What about if you could go back in time for just like a minute and tell yourself something, give yourself a piece of advice, and you can choose when exactly this advice would have to come in, but like, what would you tell your younger self
about teaching?
Yeah, just like, yeah, whether it's telling yourself earlier or whatever that like, hey, you should be a teacher or whatever. And when would that be? Just to clarify for everyone else.
Well, I'd have to say that I would want to go back to myself during my first year of teaching.
Okay.
And come parallel with that mentor teacher saying that it gets easier after the third year. And say certain things will get easier after the third year. You develop your classroom personality. You develop the way you want things to happen in your room, the organization of your day. Those things, it doesn't matter what curriculum they throw at me. I've got this is the way that I like to teach. Yeah, and this is how I'm comfortable with making the kids feel, and getting comfortable with yourself in the classroom and not trying to fit someone else's mold will save you a lot of heartache. Because when you try to teach the way someone else taught and it drains you, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would tell myself that. Figure out what makes you happy in the classroom. Listen to the advice of those around you. Because teaching is one of those things where beg, borrow, and steal. Another teacher has a great intro activity. Use it. Don't be like, well, they did it and it works for them and I couldn't use it. No, do it. Try it. Try new things.
The camping industry has R&D, rip off and duplicate.
Yes.
And that's something that at the like the like assemblies of like all the different camps, like everyone talks about it. Like it's an acceptable practice. It's like, oh yeah, cool. Can we still yes.
Yep. And there's a whole website, Teachers Pay Teachers, developed with that in mind of, hey, I put this lesson plan together. I think it's pretty awesome. Here it is. You can buy it for $1. And that way I get some credit for having developed something.
Right.
And you get to use something that's already developed.
Right. You can save a little bit of that, 6 hours outside the classroom.
Yeah. And I'm not ashamed to say I've used Teachers Pay Teachers on a number of occasions where I'm like, I just need something to make this work.
Right.
To expand off of what I know.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to apply it well. And I just look it up there and I'll find something and be like, oh, that works. Unlike Pinterest where you're like, I have no idea how this works. Teachers Pay Teachers, the teachers actually put their lesson plans and the handouts and everything. And it's, so don't be ashamed to use something that somebody else developed because they made it work. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm very curious about this. As we've talked, I've gotten more curious. So this is what I call the magic snap. If you could snap your fingers, this is like full, like no strings attached, genie magic, like things just happen. If you could snap your fingers, what would your career look like right now? Like, I'm talking, I don't know, full like holographic teaching aids, your own like master class or whatever. Like, sky's the limit.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Well, one of the things that I always thought, even when I was in college, is that I would love to be a college professor. A big distinction between college and high school.
Mm-hmm.
High school is required. College, you choose. So just
Interesting.
by being in the college classroom, even if it's not a class you chose, you are in this college because you chose it. You
Right.
want to further your education rather than you are being forced by the state and your parents to do something. Now, that doesn't mean that parents never have held
Force you.
something else
Yeah.
over their kids
Yeah.
and said, you go to college or else we won't, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And there's also the people that like their parents pay for the college, and
Yep.
so they don't take it seriously. But I've thought about it from the college side of it, like, well, more people in college are wanting to do it. But I've never thought about it from the teacher side of like, most of these students actually want to be here versus high school where it's like,
Yep. And once you get into the upper division major level classes, like all of my upper division history classes were great because these are people with a passion pursuing what they want, and our professors are just like, okay, here you go, and we're like, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great,
eating it up.
and it was so awesome. And I've always thought that would be really a great way to end my teaching career is as a professor, because at that point I get to say, I want to teach a whole semester on the Industrial Revolution. I want to teach a whole semester on the Age of Exploration. I want to teach a whole semester on European royalty or whatever it might be.
Right.
And go deep with students passionate about it and explore with them. So if I could magic snap, I think that would be what I would do, is just go to college and be teaching as a history professor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And rotate the classes year after year, because
you can.
I can. I want to teach this year, that next year.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like, is that a professorship? Nope, that's not it. What is it called? Just because there's
being a professor at a college.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different levels of professorship, because like, you can be an adjunct professor is someone who's brought in part-time. An assistant professor has to have a master's degree and teaches most of the classes. And then full professorship, you have to have a PhD and you're full-time. And then there's tenure, which is where you have been hired permanently by this college. You can't get fired, which can be a blessing and a curse.
Right. But no, but the action of doing that, because I feel like teaching is no longer applicable. It's
still teaching.
Okay, sorry. I guess my brain's trying to like come up with a better word because I'm like, well, professoring. Nope.
Well, if you think of the word profess,
okay,
confess is to tell of something that you've done. Profess is to tell about what someone else has done, and that's what a professor does. Is to
so you're professing.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be professing at a college.
Professional professor.
Okay. All right, I like it. Sorry, my brain realized that I forgot something and I'm not sure what it was.
It's okay. We'll come back to it.
Anyway, yeah, so in kind of wrapping up, is there anything that we haven't really talked about that you'd like to, or maybe something that we didn't dive deep enough in? Anything like that we missed?
I would say one of the joys of teaching is when former students come back. I've heard it for so many years from students. I'm never coming back to school, except maybe to visit you, Mr. Circo. I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you will come back and say hi to me. And then when they do come in and they're like, oh man, Mr. Circo, it's so good to see you. And some students who come back and they look at the classes and they're like, these kids are so young. I'm like, no, they're at the same age you were when you were here. Oh my gosh. But now you're older.
Yeah.
And, as a teacher, the joys of finding those students who you resonate with. And I've had to learn and deal with the fact that I don't resonate with every student.
Sure.
I have had students tell me to my face that they hate the way I teach, they don't like me, and they don't like my subject. I'm like, okay, well, as long as we're clear on this, that I am still your teacher, you will still follow my instructions, and you will still treat me with respect. You don't have to like me.
Yeah.
And I have to deal with that. But I also have those students who say, I love coming to your class, Mr. Circo. And I hang my hat on that one.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I still come day after day. And I teach, and I love teaching and instructing these students, training up the next generation, teaching them not just my curriculum, but also life skills and my Christian walk integrated into my classes. So.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say is like, so audience, you might notice that most of my family shares a couple traits that were pointed out in this of when we care about something, we very much care. We are very passionate about what we do. And I don't think any of us ever do something on the surface level, really. Like, we don't like, well, good enough. We, almost all of us, and I'm trying to think of, like, I'm not trying to throw too broad of a blanket, but I think pretty much all of us have our things that, like, yeah, we know this. We don't just know this, we know this and the stuff below that, and the stuff, like, level below that, and the level below that. And, you know, we kind of made an in-between level between these things that most people don't have a level there at all. And, like, you know, we don't just casual like, well, I learned enough for today, that's it, I'm done. Like, we are a passionate group that really learn what we learn, and then we learn a bunch of stuff on the fringe too. But I just wanted to point that out to my audience of, like, it's something that, I mean, and I'm gonna have quite a few of my other siblings. I mean, I've had 2 of them already on. This is my 3rd one. But, like, as we talk to like my siblings and my family members, like, you find, like, you understand, like, my podcast is my outlet for, like, I love to learn about people and what people don't know about different careers and subjects and stuff like that. Like, opening up lots and lots of doors for other people to dive into. But again, like, that's why I was so excited to have you on, is like, you are all in with history. Like, it's not a, well, yeah, I read a book once. I passed a quiz. No, it's like, no, I know history. I know it backwards and forwards. Like, I know not everything, but, like,
I know.
no, but, like, you know stuff, not just like, oh yeah, sure, I know some things about history. Like, it's something that you have lived, basically. You have lived learning this and teaching it, and, you know, and sorry, my brain was shorted out for a second because I almost went directly into teaching as well. But yeah, like, you've also lived teaching and learning to teach, you know, and those separately and together, of learning history and learning teaching and learning how to teach history.
Yep.
My brain got a little convoluted with that one. But yeah, but, like, it's not something that is just like, well, it's a job, it pays the bills. This is what you do. This is not to limit you, but this is who you are too. But
I had a student 2 weeks ago say, Mr. Circo, if I were going to pay you $5 million right now, the only condition is you have to quit teaching, what would you do? I said, well, if you gave me $5 million, I wouldn't stop teaching. No, you have to quit teaching in order to get the $5 million. So could it come back after I'd quit? No. Then I guess I'm not getting $5 million. Like, what? Then you don't understand. This is what I want to do with my life.
Right.
This is not I failed at something else, so I became a history teacher.
This isn't your fallback.
This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if I won the lottery, I pass a lottery sign every day on my commute to work. And a couple weeks back, or a month back, or something, it was $1.1 billion. I was like, dang. If I won $1.3 billion, would I still be a teacher? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd just be a teacher that had a little bit more money.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah. I mean, I've talked with some of my friends at the camp and like, yeah, we're not in this for the money. If you want to be rich, the camping industry's not it. And like anybody that knows anything knows that like teaching isn't, you're not in it for the money.
No.
Like that's not the motivation. Is like, well, man, I'm so glad I got into the really like high end teaching jobs that those $1 million public school teaching jobs.
Oh yeah, that $1 million contract to teach high school chemistry.
Which, to be honest, I would believe in way more than. And no offense to those that really like football, but can we pay teachers what we pay football like football players like?
Walk into the classroom with a sponsorship jacket.
And
today's
world
lesson
history
is brought to you by Ace Oil.
Hey, your science brought to you by Frosted Mini Wheats. Kellogg's history. Yeah, but no, I do want to say like I think that teachers are underpaid, especially for the in a hold on. My brain sometimes looking at it as a pay for goods system and not as its kind of just flawed perspective from the public. Like you're paying for the next generation to have a good, like healthy grip on things before they start their adult life. And from, again, I have quite a few friends that teach in quite a few different states and or countries, and nowhere are like teachers on the base level paid for what they are actually providing. Like goods, like services and goods, like if people thought of it as that, they would be fighting a little bit harder for better pay for teachers.
Yep.
Because it's like, no, this isn't, you're not standing handing papers out all day. That's not what you're paying them for. And like I get into this with most, like a lot of my professional interviews of people that get paid for whatever they do. Like people get underpaid a lot, but I would say like, and most of it comes from the misunderstanding of what they're paying for. Like graphic designers are like, well, but this is I don't even have a physical copy of this thing. It's like, yeah, you're not paying for the things I put on the page. You're paying for the experience that I put into this. Like, and you're also paying for the experience you get out of it. Like the experience is part of that. You as teachers are paying for their experience in life to be better. And yeah, and I think it's definitely not fair, like what the public thinks teachers should get paid for what they do. But anyway, I think with that, I'm done unless you have something else.
Nope.
Okay. Well, John, I really appreciate you being on today. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And for those of you listening, if you liked what you heard today, share the link, talk to your friends, say, hey, go listen to this podcast. You'll really like it. And send a comment.
Yeah. As always, I got some things to talk about. So, I can read my writing for a second. As always, a big thank you to Milana Dodd. She's the one that made my cover art. She's a graphic design artist, and you can check out her work on milanadodd.com or on Instagram at Milana's Designs. Design, no S. I almost had it right this time. You can also check out Braden Slen's YouTube channel, The Coaster Gnome. You can listen to or watch my episode that I was on of Zero Credits Accounting. It's episode 4. It's a lot of fun, a lot of chaos, but go check that out. Also, check out December's photography. You can find her at DecemberNoel.com or on Instagram at DecemberNoelPhoto. She's been doing a photo a day this year that has been like since the new year. So go check out her Instagram. She has a lot of amazing stuff that she's been putting out. So go check her out. If you need somebody to do like family portraits or something like that, she's amazing. She can do all sorts of stuff. So go check that out. Yeah. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you all on the next episode.